everybody, and welcome to Paranormal Nation Radio. Not so normal. How's Denise and Ron doing this evening?
Well, I'm going to complain and say I'm cold.
You're cold?
Yeah,
a little chilly.
Yeah, my hands.
Or shouldn't be that cold.
So.
It wasn't bad. That wind bearable today, but it's 51 degrees up here.
Yeah, that's about what it is.
We're in the 50s, but
hey, at least we're not.
Get ready. It's going to change.
Windy. Oh, yeah.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, we got, tomorrow's supposed to be 60, but it's supposed to rain.
Yeah, and then overnight change over to something a lot colder, and then Thursday. So thank you, Nigel, for sharing.
By Saturday, we're back in the 50s again.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad to hear that. So I'm tired of being cold.
I mean, we got another month of winter.
I just want to be that person complaining down in Florida. Oh, it's 55
degrees.
I
know. When you guys get down there and I hear you're cold, I'm going to say, no.
Hey, Cassie.
Remember Kansas?
No. I'll still be cold. You don't realize it's 100 degrees outside. I have a blanket on my bed.
I know.
So I'm always cold.
I got one in there that does the same thing.
So I wanted to say something. Cassie sent me a message this morning.
Okay.
And I had to laugh because with as much as she's heard me speak, I don't know if she remembers that the catalyst that made me research the Sally House so much was that there was a sign above the stair, at the door of the basement saying that a woman fell to her death on these stairs. And it's not true. I mean, I figured this is something that we could prove. I could find out if this truly happened. And that was the catalyst that made me start researching the living daylights out of that house. And I never found anything. And she says that this thing is rearing its ugly head again. And I would have to say it's probably because they found all the signs in the cabinet and they decided to either reprint them or put them back up. So
that is...
Hey, Susan and Mike.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So she asked me a question and I answered it. And I even showed, I even pulled out my book, which is just under the desk, pulled out my book. And, there's only been one woman that's died in that house. And, there may be other people who died when they were living in the house, but not in the house. And it's not, most of these people
they could have died in either side the houses.
Right, because the family owned both of them.
Right.
In fact, one guy did die in the house next door, but his funeral was in the Sally house. And Kate Finney could be in either house.
Right.
So, but nobody fell to their death on those stairs. Now, they could have since, because those stairs are horrible. I mean, you've been on the stairs. They're not great. There's no railing and they're wood and not well taken care of.
Now, I got a question. It's ever been brought up about the Sally house, right? We was always told there was a pentagram painted on the floor down there.
Mm-hmm.
Is there ever a picture to prove it?
Yeah.
Here, you want to see it?
There was actually 3.
Want to see it?
They keep saying 1, but there were actually 3. One great big one and 2 small ones.
Oh, really? Before they painted over it.
Well, the thing is he started to paint over them, and when
they realized it was chalk.
Yeah, they started mixing it in, and it ended up. He realized it was chalk at that time and stopped painting. That's why it's only partially painted.
Right.
So this may be hard to see.
He took a picture and then had a drawing made of it.
Oh, okay.
So
he took a picture of it, because he had to kick her out, had to have some proof. But it had the drawing made up, or had the drawing made of it. And that's what he went around showing. He didn't show the actual picture.
Right.
That was created by
because he didn't
Robbie Thomas
want it out there.
When Robbie Thomas went there to film.
Oh, I know.
He had to have,
he didn't know what it was.
They had to have something because there had been this. And so he asked the owner, who we need to turn on that light, asked Les for that picture, and they utilized that picture to repaint all that on the ground for the film that they were doing.
Right.
So that's how I have a picture of it is. So.
Right.
But
No, I'd always wondered that after being
he
up
let
there
us
so
have
many times. You see that dark spot and you're going, well, I just wonder if they just put black paint down there and told you that.
Hey, Dara.
No, they didn't. The bad part is, like I said, it was chalk. And when they started spraying it, you know, how chalk kind of dissipates when it gets wet. And that's kind of what it did. And that's when they...
Did he ever take a picture of the dead animals in there?
Not that we know of.
Okay.
I think he was more horrified.
I'm sure he did.
But I don't think he shared it.
In case he had to go to court.
He shouldn't have been horrified. He was a cop.
I know.
But still, you know, some people are more
well,
horrified over
he
animals.
took pictures of about everything to cover his butt to get her out of there.
Oh yeah, well,
he didn't have any problem for
the
he didn't
chief
have any
of police, the sheriff, whatever he was.
Yeah,
he probably had pool in the town anyway. He could have got her out.
Oh, he did. So
Where'd they go?
Park. And the thing is, when we're talking about her, we are talking about somebody who lived in the house after the Pickmans lived there.
Right.
And her name, well, I'm not going to tell you her name, but she was somebody who lived in the town, and she hunted that house down to live there intentionally because of the activity that had occurred or supposedly occurred.
Right.
So, but
allegedly, all we can tell you is she was a witch, a very high up one, and she worked at the nursing home.
Well, at the hospital.
Scary.
It is.
So, but tonight I brought a guest in. Got a good guy from up in Iowa, Alan Cornelison. And I think that you guys are really going to enjoy him. He's got a lot of stuff he's going to share with us. He's also an author as well as a paranormal investigator. And sounds like an interesting dude. And he does. And here's one thing. He doesn't know what a brain fart is. So we're going to teach him.
Oh.
Yeah. I had no. That part. You sent me that message. I was completely lost. I had no idea. That's how it is here in Iowa. We don't know nothing. But, I've been listening to you guys' conversation, and it kind of leads me into what we're going to talk about today, the haunted Stagecoach Inn. Mm-hmm. I originally, I investigated there for 7 years. I had been an investigator since 1982. And I thought I really had a handle on the paranormal until I investigated the Stagecoach Inn. It's a long story, but I'll shorten it up.
Hey, we got 2 hours.
When I moved back to Ankeny after being up there in Ida Grove, I'm sorry. Oh, got 2 hours. Okay. Anyway, I was brought into contact with a gentleman by the name of Chris Moon.
I know him.
You know Chris Moon. Okay.
I know him personally.
This is where the Stagecoach Inn story starts getting really kind of interesting. I had left Ida Grove area. I came back to Ankeny, and I thought my journey there was over. I thought finally I can get away from this place. It was like really bad relationship, very toxic for me, and an acquaintance of mine says, "Hey, I know this guy. His name's Chris Moon, and he's a psychic medium, and he has this thing called a ghost box, and he's going to be over in Manila, Iowa, at the Klondike Hotel, and it's like a rock's throw from Ida Grove. Would you be interested in meeting him there at the Stagecoach Inn because he'd like to know a little bit about it?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I could do that." So I make the 2-hour drive up to Ida Grove. Didn't really want to go, but okay, I'd go there one more time. Met the man, very nice man. Told him a little bit about the place, and he said, "You mind if I walk through?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. I'm a member of the Historical Society. In fact, I became a member of the Historical Society, so I had complete access to the place." So he gets his little cell phone out, and he starts doing a live stream from inside the inn. round the inn, every place. And it went on for about 45 minutes. And he says to his followers, and he had, gosh, must have had 400 people that were following this thing. He says, this place is really freaking dark. He says, I don't know what's going on here, but he says it's very dark. He says I'm picking up on all kinds of crazy stuff and blah blah blah. And well, anyway, he cuts the stream off, and I think it's all over. And he walks up to me and he says, if you ever want to do a live event from here, he says, you get a hold of me. And he says, this place has a lot to offer. I said, okay. And I knew that I had no ability to put an event together. I'm just an ordinary guy from Iowa. I don't do events. I do investigations. That's it. 3 days go by. My phone rings, and it's Chris Moon. He says, guess what? He says, we're going to do an event from the Stagecoach Inn. Then he goes on to further say to me, he says, I've investigated all over this planet. Basically, he's been on all kinds of TV shows. He's done all kinds of things. And he starts talking about what you guys were talking about here, the Sally House. Mm-hmm. He says, Alan, out of the top 10 places that I've ever investigated, the Sally House is number 1 as being the most haunted place I have ever investigated in my life. Mm-hmm. He said, the Stagecoach Inn is somewhere around the 3rd most haunted place I've ever been. I said, okay, cool. So we put this event together. It was a 3-day event, and it went horribly sideways. It was terrifying. People, seasoned investigators, and I talk about it in my book, In Too Deep. This book here, In Too Deep, you can get it on Amazon.
Okay.
Seasoned investigators, 10 years and longer, 15 years investigators, were leaving. Chris came to me and said, is it like driving down the road? I said, no, Chris, people are leaving the event. They're terrified. I mean, people were getting burnt, scratched, knocked down. Mama Moon was so overcome by something, and she's an elderly lady. Right. She just wouldn't fall to the floor on purpose. She was thrown hard to the floor there at the Stagecoach Inn.
Damn.
Hard. She was moaning. Scratches appeared on her back. And we have cameras running. We have, nice video cameras. I was working with another network using these, really nice network style cameras. This is a Canon FX 105. I use a 205. We use good stuff. And you could see these welts raising on her back. Well, when this thing's all over, Chris comes to me and he says, Alan, he says, you know what? He said, I've changed my mind. He says, the Stagecoach Inn, in my mind right now, is the most haunted place I have ever investigated in my entire life, over the Sally House. And that's why I was so intrigued when you guys were talking about the Sally House when I was back in the green room. So that's a little bit interesting information for you and what I was dealing with for 7 years.
So we dealt with that for 7 years at the Sally House. We were the tour guides.
That's funny.
There.
You had 7 years too.
Yeah, and
we were going up there before, but
yeah, we started going up there at the end of Chris Moon's time in Atchison. He was asked to not return, and I met him after that.
Okay,
and there's
it's mainly the chamber that didn't get along with him.
Yeah, it was the chamber.
It wasn't
and then the owner of the Sally House decided he did not want him back. And it was because of a prank that occurred.
Yeah. For some reason, Chris and the Sally House had a falling out. He never told me why.
It wasn't the Sally House. Well, it was the Sally House and the Atchison Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what it was,
and they never really gave us a reason.
But Les did. He said that his
of course we didn't dig.
His brother made a joke on one of the April Fool's days that the Sally House was for sale for $1 million.
Hey, Jeremy.
And
wow,
he wanted to buy it. And when he made an offer, they said no, it was a joke. And so then when the house came up for sale the next time, why would he want to do that? Plus $1 million is a little bit much for a
It
1,200
is.
square foot house.
I've been in the
That's-
Sally house. Yeah, it's
that's-
not really a big house at all.
No.
No.
That's
It's in Atchison. I mean, I hate
Yep.
to say this, but there's nothing to offer in Atchison except for some haunted locations.
the
Steel
McIntyre
plant.
Villa. That's
Hey,
it.
Well, there's some other nice places there too. But
Yeah.
you know, you got 29 mansions, and this wasn't one of them. You know, but they even sold. You know, across the road, they sold the Glick Mansion. It didn't sell for $1 million, and that's a business that actually makes money.
Yeah, I don't know of many places that sell for $1 million.
At least not in Atchison.
For that square footage,
No,
unless somebody is looking to, turn it into an attraction.
The
You know,
only
then they-
one that might sell for that much might be the Velisca Axe Murder House.
Yeah,
With the
maybe,
business plan.
maybe. Again, it's smaller yet.
Yes,
It's a
I
little
know.
teeny place.
It's tiny.
It takes a while
In
to get
fact,
the million
the
back.
people of Velisca, it's kind of like the people of Ida Grove, none of which are very happy with the fact that
Right.
the house is declared as being haunted. And in fact, the first time that I ever went to Velisca, I wasn't real sure where it was at, and I actually stopped a person there in town. He was raking leaves in his front yard.
Oh,
And I said, can you tell me where the Velisca house is? And he was extremely annoyed.
oh yeah.
He
You
rolled
know,
his eyes, didn't he?
Yeah, they just don't really. They just
Yeah, they
hate the
don't.
whole idea.
Don't like it.
So
That's just like Ida Grove. I mean, the Stagecoach Inn was the cornerstone of Ida Grove back in 1856. That's when the Stagecoach Inn was built 10 years after Iowa became a state. So it's old. And the Moorheads lived there. Another group of people were the Comstocks. The Comstocks are still the original, their bodies are still in the original cemetery in Ida Grove called the Settler Cemetery. Their bodies weren't exhumed from the cemetery and put into the new cemetery in town, the Ida Grove or Ida County Cemetery, which is interesting in its own right, because when they did move that cemetery, the Settler Cemetery, they thought they knew where all the bodies were, according to where the stones were. But, over all those years on top of a hill, the ground moves a lot.
Yep.
And they gathered the stones. They tried to probe into the ground to find coffins. And they literally in that era used pine coffins, and they just deteriorated. So they recovered what bodies they could, took the stones, put them in the new cemetery, but there's any bodies that are left behind in that old Settler Cemetery that have no headstones.
Mhm.
And I've had investigators that I brought in. It wasn't a lot of people that showed up to investigate the area, but they said there was a lot of activity up there on the hill. They're not K2s, millimeters. K2s will go off, just blow on them and they'll go off.
yeah.
Millimeters were activating all over within the cemetery, as well as dowsing rods. And what was cool, and I wish I had the video, I videotaped somebody that was very good at using the dowsing rods, and would walk, and about every third step they would cross.
Yep.
Mhm.
And then they would go to another direction, and they'd be fine. They'd come back the other way, and it'd be every third or fourth step cross.
Yep.
And that would tell me that was a body that was there.
Mm-hmm.
That was
Yeah, we're familiar
spiritual
with
energy
that.
that's
The question
buried
I
in the
would have-
ground that they missed.
Yeah, the question that I would have is, first off, why does every town have cemetery that didn't get moved? I mean, there's always one. Every town I've ever been in has that story. So it makes you wonder the validity. And I'm not questioning you. I'm not questioning you on that, because we don't know. But are the death rods
I can tell you
picking up where bodies used to be or where bodies actually are now?
And I can explain that again. They put a really thorough investigation, and they actually dug down into the ground, but they didn't find anything. I mean, you're up on a knob of a hill, and of course the ground constantly kind of settles downward, and they just couldn't find the bodies. And at that time in Ida County, there was probably maybe 70 deaths, maybe, and they recovered like 60 bodies. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
But the town got larger, and the whole county, and so they developed another cemetery someplace else. And they thought, well, it's appropriate to move these bodies from this cemetery it was just unusable. You just couldn't use it someplace else. So yes, there are bodies, and according to the Historical Society, yes, there are bodies that have been left behind. They just couldn't find them. They just couldn't recover any.
Yeah, like I said, I just hear that story so frequently that it gets to the point where
and it happens all the time.
I mean, Cheeseman Park in Denver has that story. Atchison, Kansas has that story. Not one, but two graveyards, and one graveyard never existed. I know of. Well, like I said, in Atchison, one of these graveyards never existed, but yet they tell everybody it did.
Right.
But it's one of those things that you sit there and you just kind of shake your head and go, okay. Now that we found that there are some places that it's not true, does that make us all question that for every cemetery?
Right. Well, I know that this is an actual cemetery. It was designated the cemetery in 1856, the same year that basically Ida, the town of Ida, was established, and there were lots of ceremonies that went on there. In fact, from what I understand, I couldn't substantiate it completely, but a lot of townsfolk would tell me that in a lot of cases,
he froze.
Yeah, I see that.
Well, why he froze? I got a good question.
You're still here? Wore a lot of different hats.
Okay.
They wore a lot of different hats back in the 50s. It was a school, it was a post office, it was a hospital, it was an inn, obviously, it was a courthouse. It was basically the convenience store of the 1850s. And lots and lots of travelers came through there. And the Moorheads family, they had their designated area that they lived in, and of course the travelers would stay in another area. And one of the interesting stories I like to talk about is Anna and her mother Martha. They would go out and have picnics periodically at this old oak tree that sits like a rock's throw away from the front door. And Martha and Anna would pick up beads off the ground. Well, come to find out, it was beads from corpses. The Sioux, which were prevalent in that area, would bury their dead in oak trees, and because they use scaffolds, they would use trees as scaffolding. And of course, the bodies would decompose. So the entire inn was built on Native American burial ground. All of the trees in the surrounding area they were all used as scaffolding for the Native Americans. Have you ever heard of a gentleman by the name of Chief Incapaduta? He was instrumental in the Spirit Lake massacres. He was kind of a renegade, kind of his own band of Sioux that visited primarily that portion of the state a lot. The Moorheads seen him there on many occasions, but he never would attack the inn. And the only reason they figured that they didn't attack it because it was declared as sacred ground. It was Native American burial ground, and by no means would they want to spill white man's blood on red man ground.
Or the other way around.
Yeah,
their own blood.
Way. So, in fact, when I was with Chris Moon there, Chris asked the question of why there was things there that were causing me so much problems. And a voice came through this box that he uses, and it says he's not the same blood. Well, 2 years later, get this. This is fact. 2 years later, I was adopted as a child. I was adopted when I was just a baby, and I had finally found my biological parents. And finding that out, I found out that I am like an eighth or something like that Cherokee Indian. So whatever was there said that no, I got the same blood. And I think that had somewhat to do with the reason why I was tormented the way I was. Well, at the end.
And, you know, you said something else that makes me think about stuff that I've heard from other locations. You know, that this town is built on a Native American burial ground, or that the Sally House is on a Native, and it's not. I mean, it's not. But you know, that's one of those stock things that people throw out there to validate why some place is haunted. And like I said, I'm not questioning you. I'm just making sure that people understand that we got to look at everything when we're looking at facts. What are the facts? And I know that you have looked at your facts. I'm not questioning that. But if I'm not asking the questions, I'm not going to get the answers.
Yeah, you can be as thorough as you like. I have dug into the end as deep as I possibly can, as far as the history goes. Mm-hmm. I do know that, again, we do know for a fact that was Native American burial ground. In fact, Martha and Anna had collected so many beads from around all these trees that it doesn't say for which one of the children, but Martha made a pair of moccasins.
Wow.
For her one of her kids out of all those beads that they collected. Wow. And on one occasion, the stagecoaches came through, and Martha Moorhead was waiting for a shipment of linen. She was going to make a dress for Anna, and it was blue, it was silk, and or some kind of real nice material. And she'd been working with this linen in the kitchen area, and Chief Incapaduta and his renegades, and this is all documented, showed up at the end, and he just walked in. And this guy, he's like 6'3". He's just a big old native, you know, just a Sioux buck. You know, he's a chief. He's just a big guy, and he sees this linen and he grabs it from Martha, or he tried to, and they had a tug of war match over it. And of course, he eventually won out, and he takes his linen and he just draped it over his head in a headdress type thing, and then walked out and left her without her linen. But she couldn't do anything about it. And of course, Judge Moorhead wasn't there. He was out doing whatever he does. And, but there is many occasions when there was some pretty sketchy contact with the Sioux, but they never, ever attacked the inn. If you look at pictures of the inn, and I got something here. I got this picture. This is something that somebody drew for me. You can see those top windows, how they're kind of square in shape, elongated square windows.
Yeah.
They built them like that as defensive points for the inn. They were low to the floor. They were wide, and they were designed in the manner to which that you could lay down without being hit by arrows, but you could shoot in two different, you could shoot in a wide direction, and they're all the way around the top of that inn. It was used basically as a fort, but the Indians never attacked there. Now, that's just part of what went on there. There were the Oddfellows in the 1928s, after the Moorheads had left the inn. The railroad finally came through Ida County. Ida Grove was no longer considered Ida. It was now Ida Grove, due to the reason it was named Ida Grove was due to the grove of trees that the Stagecoach Inn was in. I mean, it was around a grove of trees, so it was called Ida then Grove. And anyway, the railroad came through. There wasn't really any need for a stagecoach anymore. Judge Moorhead stayed there at the end for a while, but he passed away from pneumonia. His son Giles, who grew up, he ended up being a doctor and lived in Ida Grove. He took care of his father for as long as he could, and he died of pneumonia there at the end. Martha lived in town. But later, of course, they rented it out to several people. And one of these people they rented it out to was a gentleman by the name of John Moore. And John Moore was an interesting fellow. He was a farmer by trade, kind of. Raised a little bit of livestock there at the end. But he also was a member of a group called the Oddfellows. And they did a lot of their rituals out there. They prayed to paper mache skeletons and did secret handshakes, wore bizarre masks on their faces and stuff. And one day he was found dead. He had hung himself in a tree. They did, and according to the newspaper article, which I have, died in it. He hung himself in an elm tree, 300 rods away from the inn, 300 rods northwest of the inn, up on a high ridge. Mm-hmm. Now, in my research, have you ever seen an elm tree? Ever? They're huge. They're huge. They're absolutely, you can't wrap your arms around them. I mean, they're just the old Dutch elms. Of course, they're all gone now, but they're huge, and the branches were, like 12 foot in the air.
Yeah, way up there.
Yep.
Way up there. This is where it gets interesting for one of the stories, and what I think I was also dealing with out there. John Moore was found dead, and when they got him out of the tree, there was a note in his pocket that said all for the best. What we know about John Moore was very limited, but he had some kind of unknown illness. And he also was to be indicted on some charges very soon in his life. On that same property, according to rumor from some of the locals, during the time that he lived there, a young girl had drowned in a well on the property. And this is where it kind of turns into like a Dateline mystery. John Moore, according to the newspaper article, was being helped by kind of a lady that used to come around and just help him do chores. And he was doing canning one morning, and she was going to come by to help him can some vegetables or stews or something. And she came by early in the morning. It was like 6 o'clock. And she left about 7:30. She left John to finish up his canning, and she'd come back later in the afternoon. When she arrived later in the afternoon, she didn't find John there. But she did notice that all the livestock was fed. Everything had been watered. Everything had been taken care of. But there were tracks, pony tracks. He had a pony that was leaving out into nowhere and out into the woods. And she got worried for some reason. Why she get worried, I don't know, because people that era, they'd take off and do strange things all the time. But she gets a hold of the sheriff. And now it's almost dark. Now, according to this newspaper article, she said that the pot on the stove was boiling rapidly. Now, think about that. In the 1800s, or even in the 1820s or 1920s, there was no electricity out there. There was no gas stove out there. It was all wood-burning stove. That's the only thing they had. How in the hell is a pot going to be boiling rapidly for almost 12 hours?
Yeah, that's
part of the mystery. When they found John,
that doesn't happen with fire stove.
No, either the fire's going to go out or it's going to boil dry. One of the two. So the next part of the mystery is they found John Moore hanging in an elm tree, and his feet were like 7 foot from the ground. They had to, according to the newspaper article, get a hold of some young kids, teens, to come up to this hill where they finally found him after using lanterns. They finally found him, and they had to climb up into the tree and cut him out of the tree. Now, that might not sound odd. This does sound odd. He tied the pony up away from the tree. Okay. Now, a man who has the conscious state of mind to water his livestock, to take care, feed them, and
it wasn't a suicide.
Ride a pony up onto a hill, tie it up to a tree,
right?
Not knowing when this pony is going to be found. He didn't use the pony as a scaffold to stand on. It was away. How did he get hung?
He was
He
murdered.
was murdered.
I believe that. I believe that. And there was this odd note that said it was all for the best that was in his pocket. I think the people of that county thought he was going to fall through the cracks of possibly, with this rumor of this little girl being killed, thought he was going to maybe not be prosecuted and was killed there. Now, you got to take in mind, too, that I've got all kinds of emails from people here just recently saying back in the 60s, Ida Grove, the little Christian town of Ida Grove, the cornerstone of Norman Rockwell painting, the way this whole town's kind of laid out, used to have two signs at each end of town as you come into town from the west or from the east. And each of those town signs would say, blacks, don't let the sun...
So it's a sunset town.
Don't let the sun fall on you.
Or
That's
sundown.
exactly what it said. So there's a lot of darkness that goes on, and it has gone on in Ida County. I did a lot of investigations there. Good Lord, there's a lot of hauntings going on, but nothing like, I've never seen anything like the Stagecoach Inn. I caught a spinning wheel turning there one day. We had a lot of activity on the staircase. I used a vibration sensor, and this vibration sensor is the kind that you would buy for your home. It's magnetically, you put it on like a steel door. So if somebody really shakes the doorknob, it'll go off. It'll go into alarm. But it takes a lot of force to make it go off. And on countless occasions, I would set that vibration sensor up on the staircase, and it would go off. We'd have cameras on it, and it would go off. I put a motion sensor on the staircase, and I shined it I had the back of the motion sensor against one wall, and it was looking at the other wall opposite of, and it's only about 4 foot wide. And I had it running, and I said, if somebody wants to go in front of that motion sensor, do it. And it was about 4 foot up the steps. And I walked into another room, and as I walked into the room, I'm talking about stuff. The motion sensor goes off. I run back. I literally ran around the corner to this motion sensor, and it's just screaming. Something had went past it. So anyway, I'm trying to debunk all this stuff, trying to figure out why all this stuff's going off. And you got to understand, that's how I work. I don't believe that everything is paranormal. There has to be an explanation to something, to everything. And I was there that day trying to figure out why these motion sensors were going off, vibration sensors were going off. And on a previous investigation, one of my investigators said, hey, I think that spinning wheel turned a little bit. I just happened to glance over there, and I think it turned. I didn't see it. So I just nonchalantly said, I'm doing filming, talking about the staircase. And I said, and that's the notorious spinning wheel that sits over there in the classroom area. One of my investigators thought that maybe it turned one day. And I said, maybe today it'll turn, and this is broad daylight. And I kind of walking around the inn, and I come back into the staircase, and I just happen to turn the camera, and you can see the spinning wheel go backwards and then gets thrown forward just at a dramatic speed. And I caught that on film. And if you've ever watched anybody use a spinning wheel, they always pull it back a little bit and then throw it forward when they get ready to use, reenact it. And it is in the exact same manner. And I caught it on tape.
It's amazing.
I never have been able to figure that one out. And believe you me, I had to nail my shoes to the floor to keep from running out of that place.
So earlier you spoke about Velisca. I want to give you a little history there. His great uncle was the sheriff in that investigation of the Velisca axe murders.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all that. His uncle
his great uncle was the sheriff.
My great uncle.
Yeah, Warren Jackson was his great uncle.
Hey, Barbara. Hey, Gary.
So
I've only been to Velisca once, and it was during the daylight. I wasn't going to pay I think they want like $400 for a night there.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to, I told myself, I said, you know what? I have lived haunting. I've experienced haunting. I've gone through it. I'm not going to pay for it.
Right. You get it for free.
I'm not going to do it. But yeah, I was there during the daytime hours, and I wasn't overly impressed. Of course, it was daytime. There was
Well,
one
Hey,
person that was
you
one
had
person
stuff
was
during the
using
day
a
there.
K2 meter. Was guy was using a K2 meter, and he said, "Oh, he said, there's ghosts here in the staircase." And I said, "Look above you, pal." I said, "The air conditioner's on."
yeah, we've had some stuff happen there
How long
that we
ago?
can't explain.
How long ago was it that you went?
Oh gosh, it's probably been 7-8 years.
Okay.
Don't go there.
So that
Johnny
was, that was
I think
well. At least,
Johnny Hauser was kind of running that
yeah.
operation
At
back
least you
then.
could walk around for about as long as you wanted.
Yeah, Martha
Yeah.
doesn't allow that now.
They don't do that now.
Oh, really? Yeah, you
No,
could walk kind of just all over in there as you pleased.
It's a guy.
And,
Yeah, it's a guided tour, and you're in there about 15 minutes, and they kick you right out.
Yep.
Huh.
That's how
That's
she
too bad.
manages.
Not worth it.
You know, that's what, when I was doing the Stagecoach Inn, and I begged people. I mean, anybody can say a place is haunted. Anybody. You go into a place, you can say, it's haunted, and take it for what it is. When I asked for permission to investigate there, and there's a story behind that. Again, it's all in my book, In Too Deep. When we moved to Ida Grove, I was there for a year. We moved there in approximately the late part of 2011 to 2012. And my wife had a nephew that lived there, and he's a real big sportsman, he said, "Hey, Alan," he says, "I know you like to hunt deer." He says, "I want to take you to a place. It's called Moorhead Park."
Mhm.
He said, "It's where everybody goes to go hunting deer at." And I said, "Okay, that's cool. Like to see this place." And so we drive to Moorhead Park, and through the trees, I could see this house. And I said, "Andy," I said, "does somebody live here?" He said, "No." He says, that's just the old Moorhead house. It's a stagecoach house, a Stagecoach Inn. It's a museum now." I go, "Oh, okay, interesting." Well, Andy kind of took me to all these little deer hot spots, but I couldn't get it out of my head. I thought, yeah, I'm a paranormal investigator, for crying out loud. I just had this bug in my head that I thought, I just wonder. So at the end of our little drive through the park, we finally made it back to my house, or my mother-in-law's house. And I said, "Andy," I said, "who do I get a hold of to do a tour in that place?" And he says, "His name's Steve Wilkins." And I said, "Well, I know Steve. I'm a member of the American Legion with him, and I'll talk to him." So I talked to Steve one day, and he said, "Yeah," he says, I can get you in out there." So I walked in out there, and he gives me the 10-cent tour. And yeah, I didn't notice anything particularly odd until we got to this like a showcase. It was a hutch with glass windows on it. It was all locked. And he starts talking about all the items in there. There was like a mammoth bone or something, some kind of a bone from some dinosaur. All these museums, old museums. They always find old bones and stuff. But there was this shoe. And I said, "What's the story with the shoe?" And he said, "Well, he says, upon reservation of this house, we found this shoe in the wall. We found some coins. We found what looked to be like a whole plate of food." And of course, the bells just went off in my head right away. And because I knew the significance of putting shoes in walls. People in the 1800s used to put shoes in walls to keep evil out. It was thought that the shoe held the shape of the wearer's foot, his soul, his imprint. So they would put those shoes in walls in weak spots, like in chimneys, windows, around doors.
Yeah.
Over the years, now we're getting in the 1900s, that has kind of egressed into putting horseshoes over the front door for good luck. This tradition has gone on clear back, oh gee whiz, the Roman era, when they would bury slaves in the walls of their enforced, their, what do you call them, forts, I guess, thinking that their souls would help protect against the intruding troops from coming in. And so this has gone on for a long time. So right away, I thought, wow, why would somebody put that in there? And then I heard about the Native American burial tree. And I thought, oh my God, there could be actually something going on here. There could be something that's lurking around outside that the Moorheads themselves were scared of. In fact, when Giles Moorhead wrote his book about Ida County, he called it Ghosts of the Past, which to me was just mind-boggling. Why would somebody that, of great knowledge, a doctor, speak of anything about ghosts? So anyway, I went to the Historical Society and I got permission to investigate. I wanted a week, but they gave me 3 nights. That was it. And literally for the first 2 nights, it was like a vacuum in there. There was more sound outside when I'd walk outside, just to get some fresh air, because it had that musty antique, kind of museum smell to it.
Yeah.
And just had to go outside and just get some air, because the air wouldn't move in there. All the windows were nailed shut. There's only one door that worked. And 2 nights of that was just like watching paint dry. And the third night I was in there, I had a ghost meter, just a cheap ghost meter like this one right here.
Yep, those work. Those work.
It worked real good.
Yep. And I had it sitting on a flag case, a glass case in what they call the church area or the community room area. And it was sitting on top of a Civil War flag. And I just shined my flashlight on it. And at this time, the only thing I had to record with was a VCR and one security camera. And that would plug in. I used a cord that I ran, I think it was clear outside on a pole, because there's no power in this house anywhere. And so that's how I powered this VCR. And I just shined the light down on the meter to see if that little needle was moving at all. And I said, the house is essentially flat. I said, there's nothing going on. And that's when my heart stopped. Literally, something jerked on the back of my coat, just right on the bottom cuff. And I turned around because it's pitch black in there, and I'm shining the flashlight around. And of course, you can see all this on film. I'm thinking that I maybe had backed into something and I caught my coat on a chair or something, and there was nothing there. And I asked a question. I said, is there someone in this room with me? Not a sound. None of my meters were going off. Nothing was going on. It was just dead silence. So I'm kind of stirred up a little bit, because that just doesn't happen to me. I've never had anything physically grab me before. And I'm trying in my mind to rationalize it again. Still, did I catch my coat on something? I had to snag myself on something. So I set everything down and I walked into another room. It was called the men's room. And the reason I walked in there was because it was kind of lit. Not really lit. It was just kind of not even twilight really, but there was an outside yard light. So it was a little more light in this room than any other room. So everything was kind of silhouetted a little bit better. And I felt a little more comfortable because I could kind of see my surroundings a little better. And so I sat over in the furthest corner of this room where I could see where I just came from. And I could also see towards the kitchen area of the building, of the inside. And trying to calm down, and kind of cornered myself, but at least I can kind of see everything from where I'm sitting at. And that's when the plates start clinking. There was china in the kitchen area, and I could hear china clinking together, like somebody was starting to move around plates and making a meal. And as I talk about it in the book, when I got up to try to walk out of there, my legs literally felt like lead. I could not hardly pick them up. I was terrified. I didn't know what was going on. And I got out of there and I sat on the tailgate of my Durango, because it was just parked just outside the door. And I tried to pull myself together and say, come on, Alan, you're being an idiot. There's nothing there. And I just kind of looked up at this place, and it just all of a sudden, it just looked like it just grew. It didn't grow, but it just had that feeling of just ominous, just dread that just was there. And as most investigators, we like and love our equipment. We take really good care of it. I literally got the courage, jumped up, went back into the location, and pulled on every light as I went through every room. picking up everything I had by the armfuls and throwing it in the back of my Durango. I didn't care. I just wanted to get out of that place. The following day, I start going over all the audio evidence that I had. I had a digital recorder running the whole time, and it got to that point where you can hear me say, "Is there someone in this room with me?" And clear as a bell. In fact, if you go to my Dark River Paranormal page, you can find all these recordings. Everything that's in the book, I caught on video or tape. There's a very clear young person's voice that says, "Yes, it was me," and it's all history from there. What I should have done was said, "Okay, Historical Society, there could be something going on there. I've had enough, and see you later." But instead, it turned into an obsession for me, and I was there for 7 years. And in that 7 years period of time, I think I intruded on that space so much that it started intruding on my own space. It about destroyed my marriage, about my life. I about beat the hell out of a minister. I wouldn't do that. It was just an incredibly bad time. And every time that I went through that situation, of investigating, I had them senses of dread where I would self-monitor my heart. Everything was going crazy, for like 5 days. And then all of a sudden it would go away. And I'd think to myself, it really wasn't that bad. I'm going to go back there and try that again.
Yep.
And it was over and over and over again. I worked for a tire shop there in town. It was called Rep Tire. And on my lunch breaks, I would go out to the inn and I would sit in the front porch and I would eat my lunch. And I get done with my lunch. I go back to work. I get off work. I go back out to the inn and I investigate until almost dark or at dark.
Obsessed with it.
It was constant. It was
You were drawn to the house. Or
it
drawn
was
there for some reason.
Just like I was to the Sally house.
Like she was with the Sally house.
And it turned into a complete. I refer to it as my hell. People say, "Well, how could it be so hellish?" And I said, "Well, everybody's hell is different." And as I described in my second book, In Conflict, when I tried to explain to people what hell is, for one person to stand in a checkout line with a screaming kid that's pulling, stuff off of shelves, they might think that's hell while somebody else doesn't.
Right.
Well, one person sitting in sweltering traffic, summertime, but somebody else is saying, "Hey, this is a good time for me to just listen to the radio and just relax." So everybody's hell is different. And the Stagecoach Inn was my own personal hell. And when things started occurring at my mother-in-law's house, for instance, we moved her down to the lower levels of her house because she was getting to the point where she was falling a lot. And so we put her in a parlor area. We kind of set it up with a bed and all the things she would need. And she went to me one day. She says, "Alan," she says, "what are you kids doing running up and down the stairs at night?" I said, "Mom, nobody's running up and down the steps." She says, "You are, and I'm getting tired of you keeping me awake." So I set up the camera one night at the top of the steps, and I had, again, one of these little, the ghost meter, and I set it on the steps, and I have the camera kind of up on the landing looking over the handrail because I want to catch all of this, the staircase all the way down. And honest to God, it's called The Shadow. You can go to the Dark River Paranormal page and you can see it. There is something that moves across the wall, a shadow, goes right up against the ghost meter. The ghost meter goes off and the shadow runs away from it. So something at the Stagecoach Inn was now following me home and invading my space. I talk about my brother-in-law, Mike, who is a minister, for the Church of God out of Pennsylvania. And he'd come back every year for my mother-in-law's birthday every year. And I told whatever was there, I said, "Look, I don't know who you are, what you want, but if you don't leave this family alone, I'm going to tell Mike about it. We're going to have you removed." That's when something very frightening for me happened. I hadn't had a chance to talk to Mike about what was going on yet. One morning, We're eating breakfast, and he had a traveling companion in the ministry with him, and they enjoyed coming and visiting with Mike's mother as well. And we're at the breakfast table, and she says, the oddest thing happened to me last night. And I said, what's that? She says, well, I was laying there in bed, and I could see Mike's room from my doorway. She said, move. I was like paralyzed in my bed, and Mike was standing at the foot of his bed. I could see where he was at in his pajamas, and his face was like 6 inches from the wall, and he was just standing there. And my heart sunk. I thought, oh my God, whatever this is showing me through her experience. It's I mean, he's not one of these internet ministers. He's been doing this since, 1974, something like that. I mean, he's an ordained minister. He's went to seminary school, went to all this stuff, and now it's screwing with him. And he didn't recall any of this. And she said, I finally fell asleep. She said, and I woke back up, and she was able to move, and Mike was no longer standing at the foot of his bed. So you tell me what was going on, because I sure as hell don't.
So how long did?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. So how long did
we had crazy things going on at our house too?
So how long did the activity occur?
It went on off and on for probably 4 years. It started about 2 years after I started investigating there, and then it went off and on throughout the remainder of the time until I realized that these things happen so stealthily, you don't even really know that it's going on in your life. If you just think weird things are going on, you don't even with
Cut out.
Froze up again.
Froze up.
Yep. I'd like to say hi to everybody in the chat room. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, hi. No, you don't know this thing called the paranormal. It's so stealth. It'll and
usually it's me. Okay. Hi. How are you?
His internet's messing up on him.
Yeah. Just internet. It's or whatever. Internet sucks. It gives me a chance to pour a cup of coffee.
We checked Gary's speed down at his house on Bright Speed. Not even 1 meg upload.
So I don't know.
He'll be back with us, folks. Hang on.
Yeah.
Paranormal.
See, paranormal.
It's paranormal.
Yeah, paranormal. So, but anyway, that's everything, and I can't emphasize this enough. In this book, everything in this book that I write about and talk about, you can go to my page and find the video associated to it. Everything from the spinning wheel to talking to people about the inn. There was a gentleman by the name of Elmer. Elmer was one of the old farmers of that era. And when I was getting ready when I got permission at the library one night to investigate the inn, Elmer in his old overalls, he walks up to me, he says, Alan, he says, I am so grateful. So I'm grateful to God that you're going to be investigating that place. I go, really? Why? Let me tell you a story. He says, it's been about 2 years ago. So I went out there. He says, it's a museum. and we're always freshening the place up. We're putting new stuff in, constantly getting donated, which is a big key to me, that that a lot of the activity is residual, because they're always getting stuff donated from all over the nation to this place of that era. So he's taking some new stuff out there, and he says all of a sudden, he says, I hear footsteps walking across the upper level. And he says, I got mad. He says, I got so mad. He says, I stormed up the steps. And this is an old guy. He's probably in his 70s, 75, almost 80. He says, I got upstairs. He said, there was no one there. There was no windows busted out. There was nothing. He said, it scared me. He said, I had no idea what was going on. I said, oh, that's quite the story there, Elmer. A year later, I'm getting ready to do an investigation. It was on a Friday night, and the park ranger shows up. And he says, what's going on tonight, Alan? You going to investigate? And I said, yeah, I'm going to investigate her tonight. He said, I ever tell you the story about Elmer? And I go, no, what? And of course, I already kind of knew a story about Elmer. Elmer told me. He says, well, I'm doing my patrol through the park, and here's Elmer walking around the inn. I said, yeah, it's a gun. He says, yeah, exactly. He says, I approached Elmer, and we had a little short conversation. And he said, I said, Elmer, you can't carry a firearm in this park. And then Elmer says to me, he says, I know that. He says, but let me tell you a story. And he told the park ranger, his name's Rhett, the same story he told me. And he says, I will be damned if I ever go back in that place without a gun. Now, what he's going to do with a gun in there and a haunted location, I don't know. But that's how stigmatized he was to whatever was going on in there. I recorded something one day. I found out that Andy, my wife's nephew, his grandfather was Doc Kenny. Doc Kenny was the local veterinarian, but he was also the chief organizer of the Historical Society. And he was approached by the Park Service one day, and they said, look, you either got to tear this old place down or fix it up, one of the two. And so Doc Kenny organized the Historical Society, and he was adamant that every had wooden pegs, square nails, everything of that era had to be used in order to put the inn back in its original shape. That's why it's on the National Historical Registry. Well, I'm in there one day, and I'm doing some EVPs, and I said, my name's Alan. I says, and I just recently found out that Doc Kenny, you might know somebody that I know. It's my wife's nephew, and his name is his name's Andy. I didn't hear anything. Well, I came back home, and I went over that EVP, and of course I hesitated and paused, and in that pause you hear Andy, and it blew my mind. And I called down to my wife. She was downstairs. I yelled, I said, Pam, I said, come up here and listen to this. She puts the headphones on, and she says, oh my gosh, that said Andy. I said, I know. I said, get Andy on the phone. So we call Andy, and he is a devout Christian. He doesn't believe in any of this paranormal stuff. Never has, never will. Unfortunately, we lost him to Lou Gehrig's disease here a couple of years ago. But
Sorry.
Anyway, Andy, I said, listen to this. And he's just kind of grinning. He has the headphones on. And all of a sudden, you could just see the blood wash from his face. And he looks at me just cold stone and says, that was Grandpa. Just complete. And it still to this day puts chills up my spine when I talk about that. But he just says, that was Grandpa. And he listened to it like 3 times. And he finally just took the headphones off. He set them on my desk, and he walked away. He didn't say another word. And he never talked about it from that point on.
Did he believe after that? Or you don't know because he never talked about it?
He never said. He never talked about it again. And in fact, his wife just didn't like the idea of anybody talking about ghosts and stuff. They just didn't, that didn't go over very well in their household anyway.
So there are no ghosts
me being
in
a
the
paranormal
Bible?
investigator, I didn't get invited to a lot of. What?
There are no ghosts in the Bible?
In the Bible?
Yeah, because you said he was a devout Christian.
Yeah. it talks about the Holy
Right.
Ghost, as far as I know.
All the time.
But excuse me, my mouth's getting
It's
dry.
okay. It was just me being sarcastic anyway.
No. But but talking about Bibles, and of course I talk about it, and here again, and it should have turned a light switch on for me, but it didn't. When I would record all of everything that I captured, I really didn't have a good way to upload it to Facebook. Everything that I captured. So I used, at that time, the only thing I had was a Bell and Howell video camera. And I would set it on books, and I would put it up against a little black and white TV, and I would take the recording, they'd do the VCR, and I just play it. When I find something, I'd play it and I record it. Then I had that little SIM card, and I'd put it in my computer, and then I'd make a little video out of it. I did this for, I don't know, 2 or 3 different times. And one day I realized, I said, I'm using books to stack up to put my cameras on, and all these other things, stacking them on books. Guess what they were?
Bibles.
All of them. and I didn't even recognize the fact that's what I was using. And I should have took that as a hint, I'm thinking. And so it's just another layer of curiosity of, again, was something telling me something? Am I supposed to be doing this? Should I be backing away? But eventually I did back away, and I left there. I did that investigation in 2018. And in fact, I called it the Stagecoach in 2018. And that's when I finally, I seen something that was not of this world. And I left. I'll never go back. Never. I have no reason to go back there.
Same here.
The Stagecoach Inn needs to remain as it is. It needs to remain a museum. It doesn't need to be investigated. I tried so hard, and going back to what I was trying to say earlier about, anybody can say a place is haunted. I tried so hard in those 7 years to get somebody to come and investigate it, to validate my findings. I really wanted somebody to come in there and say, yes, what you're experiencing is real. I had like 7 teams that showed up like once a year, and it was really cheap. It was a donation to the Historical Society. We couldn't charge a fee. It had to be a donation, because if it was anything more than that, it would do something to their tax exemption or something like that. So, it was cheap. It was $20 a person, and 5, 6, maybe 6 teams that showed up. And every one of them left there just shaking their heads like, oh my God, they've never experienced anything like that before. One team had what they call a beam sensor. Excuse me. And they set it up in front of a window in the judge's quarters. Now, Judge Moorhead, John Moorhead, he was the judge of Ida County. He was a very educated man, and they voted him judge. And he was a judge of mostly county or property lines. He understood how to measure property and who owned what and everything else. And farmers would come and plead their cases to him at the Stagecoach Inn. But Martha wouldn't allow them to walk through the house with their muddy boots on. So they would meet at the window outside of the inn, and they would plead their case to the judge, and he would make his ruling on who owned what. So on this particular night, this group of individuals, they set this, what they call a beam sensor, across the window. And I just happened to be in there with them, and I had that crappy Bell and Howell camera, and the alarm goes off. And they're scatting around like, that can't be going on. That can happen. That just can't happen. That alarm should not be going off. And I interviewed one of them afterward, and I said, what's that thing called? He said, it's called a beam sensor. And he says, something has to physically break that beam and go off. He says, in fact, we purchased this thing for Edinburgh Manor. And he says, we were certain of all the places in the entire world, that beam sensor would be tripped, would be at that place. And he says it has never, ever gone off until tonight. And that was impressive.
So
So I don't know if it was a judge or not that was.
Out of all the times you investigated or you were there, was it always active, or did it have?
No. There'd be times that I could be there for a week, and it'd be like, again, it would be like a vacuum.
That's like Sally House. Sometimes that felt like an old regular old house. Other times,
it just had the smells. It just, I learned over the time I was there. I could learn to understand the sounds, how it made.
Yeah.
And you recognized, and you knew that it wasn't paranormal. It was just normal settling sounds of the winter, spring, and fall. I was there all year round. I was familiar with everything that place did. But one night I set up some video cameras when I finally got more cameras, a bigger DVR system, and I would set cameras up there on the weekends and leave it. And I'd just lock the doors and I'd leave. I wouldn't tell anybody there was cameras in there. I didn't want nothing stolen. And I go back and I retrieve them. And then over the week, I would just take the time and I'd watch 20 minutes of video or whatever on camera 1 or camera 2 or camera 4. And there were several occasions, and take in mind I had audio on all these cameras.
Yeah.
You could hear footsteps in there, and then you would see dust fall from the ceiling.
Yep.
As if somebody was walking, and then of course dust would be falling down. So, and I knew the place was locked up. There was nobody in there, and it was like 2:00 in the morning when I discovered this kind of stuff. So it would occur there when I was there or when I wasn't there, and I think it's going to always occur. There is something very dark that's there. I don't know what it is. I've done some research about native burial grounds that's basically states if you disturb it and you build on it, that there are dark entities that will haunt a location until it is brought back to its state that it was before it was built on. Just like the Amityville house, supposedly. The Amityville house was built on native ground, but it was for the insane. Believe it or not, a lot of Native Americans designated certain parts of their encampments for the sick, the elderly, and the crazy. And what I've read and what I understand, where the Amityville house was built was for these insane and crazy and sickly people. And that's probably why it's so active, and it'll remain that way until the land goes back to its normal state. And
it'll never be changed.
Yeah.
They're landlocked out there. That's all they can
Right.
do. So
Yeah. So it'll always be that way. But it's not to say the Stagecoach Inn. It's it's almost nearly 200 years old now, and they've done a good job of keeping it up. But it may fall. In fact, and this is really, I don't know how to explain this. It's crazy. The Native American burial, the big oak tree that's out there. On my last investigation, it was just ominous the whole time I was there. I go outside, I didn't feel comfortable. I went inside, I didn't feel comfortable. I was sitting in my Durango at the time, and there was that yard light that was outside, and it would barely illuminate that oak tree area and the old barn. There's a barn that's also there that was built the same time as the inn, but it's not on the historical registry because they used modern lumber to fix it back up. Well, when I would go back out there just to turn the motor on for a little bit and warm up, because it was winter, it was cold. And I would see shadows mixing in between all the evergreen trees, real low to the ground. And I thought, that looks like dogs. And I'd flip the headlights on the Durango, and it'd be gone. Nothing. Nothing. Shut the headlights off. A few minutes to go by, and I start seeing these, it looked like canines. And at one point, I got out of the Durango. I went and it was going to walk back into the inn, and I actually heard on that frozen ground, the grass, what sounded like pads of feet galloping towards me from the back. And when I turned around, there was nothing there. But it sounded like paws. You've all heard dogs and they run across the yard.
Right.
This is exactly what it sounded like. Now, it was a week, 2 weeks later, I get this somebody messaged me on Facebook and said, "Hey, Alan, you need to look at this." And the Native American, they said there was a bad storm, real bad storm that came through Ida Grove. And for some reason, somehow, the burial tree collapsed to the ground. It looked like somebody took a saw and cut it right off. And there's only about 6 foot of the trunk left. Nothing else. Nothing. The house, the other trees, the old sheds, the little makeshift outhouse they had there, a replica that was just basically on just a few rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing was disturbed, just that one tree. And it was like, to me, I thought to myself, is this some kind of divine intervention? I don't know. And nor will I ever know, because I'll never go back there again anyway.
So one of the questions I have is,
Sure.
Do you believe that there's elementals out there that are controlling a lot of the stuff that's going on out there?
I don't know that. I was asked by, I had a small team at one point. And at one point, I was called Wanajee Paranormal. Wanajee was a Native American word that meant spirit or ghost. And they were always asking me, they said, let's investigate outside and take pictures and stuff out there and try to figure out if there's any elementals here. And again, I'm the kind of guy that, I thought, we live on a really dirty planet. I don't want to be taking pictures outside because there's cottonwoods everywhere. It's in a park, for crying out loud. There's pollen's in the air, there are bugs, there's all kinds of crap. And I just didn't want to investigate out there. Not that there wasn't teams that did. And a few of those teams believed that there were elementals that were in the area. So are there? There could be. I can't say no. I can't say yes. I can say that there is probably some, what I refer to them as keepers of the land. And it has to do with the Native American side of things. So that could be what's related to what I believed as those shadowy figures, those dogs that look like dogs. I mean, the way they slinked and loaded, it was like a prowl.
Mm-hmm.
When they moved, it was kind of like a prowl, real low and very deliberate in their steps. And so, I can't really answer that question. Could be, yeah, sure, why not? I can't say yes or no.
Going along with the Native American thought process. Okay, so I'm Cherokee and Blackfoot.
Okay.
So I know what part of the thought process is that yes, we have spirits, but we also have other things that are of the land that we can't explain. We as people have trouble explaining.
Right.
Because we don't know what, even the Native Americans, even with as much as they know,
a lot of mythology. Yeah, there's a lot of mythology in Cherokee Nation. I'm sure you've heard of Spearfinger.
Mm-hmm.
Native American lore. It was a woman that would kill Native American men. She would take on the shape of something very beautiful, and she had this very pointed finger, and she would stab and take their internal organs out. It's a crazy lore thing, but it has to do with the Cherokee. And the Cherokee has, they believe that everything was living. The grass, the trees, the air, the thunder, lightning, it all had spirit to it.
Right. Another question on here was, is it still available to investigate?
No, it is not, and never will be. People ask me that all the time. They said, Alan, are you ever going to go back there and investigate? And I go, yep. About 5 seconds out of every day. It's right there all the time. But no, it's no longer open to investigate. You can tour it. You can get a hold of the Ida County Historical Society and ask to do a tour. And they would be more than happy to give you a tour of the inn, but they would not shine on the fact if you said, well, are there ghosts out here? They would just freak.
Oh, okay.
don't get me wrong. There's a certain group of people, individuals out there, what I call the younger generation, who are very interested in what I'm doing. In fact, the president of the Historical Society was very interested in what I was doing. But there was also another group of individuals, which I call kind of the godfathers of the town. They didn't like me at all. They didn't like the idea that I was putting a negative light on their little cornerstone of the world. I mean, the Stagecoach Inn, it was the cornerstone of Ida County, and they didn't like the idea of people wanting to talk about ghosts and not about the history. And so I was kind
In
of
other words, they didn't want tourism up there.
Well, they wanted the people to come in and tour the place, but they didn't want it. And it really isn't set up for doing proper investigations. One, there's no water there. Two, there's no electricity to speak of. Three, it's not heated.
Well, I guess
There's
at
no
least
place to go to the
Sally House
bathroom. You got to go
had
someplace to
heat.
park and find one of the outside tie boats.
Couple times
Yeah,
no water.
it's not really, it's not set up to, it's basically you're roughing it. When you go out there, you're roughing it.
We've been in the worst places.
It's not friendly. Well, I'm sure they're out there, but to do a 12 or 13-hour investigation, you have to get in your car, you have to drive into town, to go to the bathroom, go to the nearest convenience store. But you could do that, but they just said, enough's enough. We don't want this kind of negative type attention brought onto our little lovely lady, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
Crystal, you're right. Melbourne didn't have heat there for a long time.
Not much.
Yeah, we froze our asses off there.
Oh, yes, we did.
But yeah, we've done some, we have a porta potty of our own that we take with us so we can go anywhere we want.
Have you been to Malvern, Alan?
I have. Yeah. I have. Yeah, I've been there on 3 different occasions. One of my investigations was pretty interesting, actually. I played the Native American flute, and I played a lot. I use it in my investigations, especially if I know that there could possibly be Native Americans attached to a location. And I didn't know if Malvern had any Native American ties, but I was in an area of the location where I guess was kind of the old folks' home, kind of the nursing home area. Mm-hmm. And I found a bathing chair in this bathroom. Mm-hmm. And I pulled the bathing chair out and I set it in the hallway, and we put a millimeter on it, and we're videotaping the millimeter, and I started playing the flute. And after about 30 seconds, the millimeter starts reacting. It started off like a 0.4, then it went to like a 0.2, and then it was like 1.7 and bouncing back and forth. And then all of a sudden it's jumping up to 0.7 and 7.7. And as I'm playing, and then when I stopped playing, the millimeter would stop reacting. And every time I start playing again, it was like it came back. It would sit down in this chair, and it was just like listening to me play. And it was probably the coolest experience I've ever had. As far as making some kind of connection with something that was in an area through the power of music. It was really cool.
And it could just be that music therapy for them.
Could be. And I don't play anything like familiar music. I just play what is, it in our culture, we just play a beautiful sound. Mm-hmm. And that's all I did. It was whatever's in my heart is what I play. And if it sounds good in my head, I just make the noise. And on this particular occasion, whatever I was playing, it really enjoyed. It was a lot of fun. I wasn't disturbed by it. We weren't scared. We were all just kind of awe.
To be honest, there's never been
what was going on, and there were several of us that was witnessing this.
Even with all the crap that happens to me every time we go any place, I've never been scared at Malvern.
No,
Malvern, I've never been intimidated about Malvern. Although, when I wrote the book In Conflict, It's this book here. I'm shameless, aren't I?
No, that's what this is all
In
for.
conflict. The reason I call it in conflict. The reason I call it in conflict is I was asked by Jim Martin. Jim Martin is a very good friend of mine. He owns another network. It's called the Spirit Realm Network, and he was a part of.
Yep.
And he was a part of that investigation at the Stagecoach Inn. We had that big event. And after that event, things calmed down for a while. Jim notifies me. He says, "Hey, Alan," he says, "we're starting this new network." He said, "What do you think about doing another event out there?" And I go, "I don't like the idea at all." And he says, "Well," he says, "I'm thinking," he says, "we'll get Chris involved again and we'll do another show up there. And maybe you can go up there and just kind of just do some B-roll." And I said, "I don't think they're going to go for it, buddy." I said, I can ask them, but I don't think they're going to go for it." Well, I called Steve Wilkins and I asked him, I said, "Is there any way that we can do another event?" He said, "No." He says, "They're not going to let you do that." And I said, "Well, is there any way we can get internet in there so I can do a live stream?" He says, "No, there's no way we're not going to allow internet into that place." So I get a hold of Jim. I call him back. I said, "Well, whole idea is kind of a wash." And I'm thinking to myself, thank God, I don't really want to do this. He said, "Well, I'll tell you what." He says, "What we'll do is we'll still make an event out of it. We'll do an online event. We'll have you still go up there and kind of do a little investigation, do some B-roll, and then we'll present it on the Spirit Realm Network as, a question and answer thing. And then we'll do some cutaways of some of the stuff that you did when you investigated." And I'm thinking, oh, crap. I don't want to do this. I really don't. After I left the Stagecoach Inn, I was so doubting myself. I didn't believe that I was cut out for this. Everything that I thought I knew about the paranormal, I didn't. I was one of these guys that thought, I know everything there is to know, and I didn't. It kicked my ass. I was terrified of it. I had to walk away from it. And now I have a good friend that I don't want to disappoint, telling me that he wants me to go back there. My confidence level's low, thus is in conflict. And it was, and that's what this book is about. It's about a journey of myself getting that confidence back to go back to what I refer to now as that place. I don't even like to call it as the Stagecoach Inn, just that place. In fact, when I left there, again, I was called Wannabe Paranormal. I changed the name to Dark River. I wanted to disassociate everything about that place that was associated with me.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that I had that was associated with it, I got rid of it. If I had a T-shirt that said Wannabe Paranormal, I got rid of it. If I had the keys, I still had the keys to the padlock, I got rid of them. I just got rid of them. I just didn't want anything to do with that place anymore. And so eventually it turned into me going up there and I investigated, and
So similar.
it wasn't, it was just it was bad.
It's funny how you said that. This is the old key to the Sally house.
Mm-hmm.
See, yeah,
And,
I see.
And I still have it every day just as a reminder, because I was trusted to have this key. That's what it shows me. It tells me, hey, I was trusted to have this.
I don't have anything. Well, I kind of do. I talk about the nightmares that I still have. And I commissioned an artist, and they did a painting for me that is really close to what my nightmares look like associated to the Stagecoach Inn. But here recently, that drawing.
That drawing was done by Rex, right?
Yes, it was. It was done by Rhett. And I asked him, I said, "You think you could do a picture of the Stagecoach Inn for me?" And he says, and I had a lot of photos on the Stagecoach Inn, different angles, different things, the outside of that place. And he said, "Yeah," he says, "I can do it for you." I said, "Cool."
And this is the one he did.
I got the original one.
Isn't this one he did in Pointillism?
Yeah,
Yep,
dots.
that's
Yeah.
what, yeah, that's
Oh,
what it's
yeah.
called, is
Lots of
pointillism. Yeah.
little dots. Yeah. Anyway, story behind this. The story behind this is, and I didn't tell you. God damn, it freaks me out every time. This photo. This was a photo of the inn. This was a true picture that I had taken. And the story behind this picture is this was the last night that I investigated the Stagecoach Inn. It was just going to be like for posterity. I went outside, I took a picture of the inn, and it just seemed so odd to me that happened to be the picture that he chose
Yeah.
to to paint that night. Now, I told you that there's another story behind my book where I put it In Too Deep. This one, In Too Deep. I call it In Too Deep because I was in way over my head. I'm not ashamed to say that. Originally, it was called this: Ghosts and Legends of the Stagecoach Inn.
I remember that book that when you put that out.
It did really well. And I found the reason I got rid of this publisher. One, I didn't really like the title ever. I wanted it something else, but he was kind of taking charge of everything. And he said, we're going to call it Ghosts and Legends of the Stagecoach Inn. It sounded really hokey and dumb to me. But anyway, he was kind of screwing me over on how he was paying me. That's not what upset me. What upset me was,
I know who that is.
Yeah, his name, well, his first name's Eric. And I'll just say that's it.
Then no, it wasn't the one I was thinking.
Okay. Anyway, somebody says, hey, you need to check out this website. I said, okay. So I go to the website and I check it out. And lo and behold, there's my publisher on this website. My publisher is the minister of the Church of Satan.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
so you said adios.
And I did. And I said, I can't do this. It's already bad enough I'm a paranormal investigator, but now that, I don't want to be associated with somebody who worships the devil.
Right.
And so now it's kind of an inside joke with me. Not only did I investigate hell, but my publisher was a disciple of Satan. So,
so you were getting it coming and going.
So, yeah. So I only have like 10 copies of this left.
I think all those publishers are.
Well, the ones in California aren't, because I went through three. Yeah, I went through three managers.
Maybe it's something in common with all of them. I don't know.
I don't know, but that's when I came up with In Too Deep, and I knew the story wasn't done. When I wrote this book, the original book I wrote it in 3 weeks. It was 56,000 words. I wrote it in 3 weeks. And I'd never written a book in my life. In fact, the story goes, even writing the book, I was basically kind of doing one of these things on Facebook. And Daniel Class, of all people, comes on. And he says, Alan, you need to write a book about this place. I said, I have no idea how to write a book. He says, I can hook you up with a guy. So he got me in touch with this publisher, and I zoomed through it. He says, Alan, I need to get this done before a certain date, before Halloween. He says, I want to get this out in the next publishing group. And so I just buzzed right through it. And I knew that there was some stuff there that I wanted to put in, particularly that last investigation. Well, I didn't have time to do that. And so I just vaguely touched on it. And so that's when I got a hold of Eric again. And I said, look, about 2 years later, I said, the book isn't done. Is there any way that we can add a couple chapters? He said, well, yeah, sure. He said, we do it all the time. Well, that's when, of course, I found out that he was kind of screwing me, and then this whole Satan thing. And I said, I don't want to party no more. And so I left, and I reached out to another publisher, dropped him. What wasn't very hard to do. I had a contract, but I had lawyers too. So Anyway, I was able to get out of that contract pretty easy. And the whole investigation is like 8 hours. And I thought, how am I going to write a book, 8-hour investigation? How am I going to add on to in Too Deep? And actually, they rewrote it for me. The new publishers did the In Too Deep for me. And I wanted to add on to it. And I thought, it's only like 8 hours investigation. How can I make this interesting? And I thought, you know what? I'm going to talk about what I went through personally as an individual to get to investigate the Stagecoach Inn. And that's when I came up with 94,000 words, 1 pound, 8 ounces of book to talk about getting to that final investigation. And I've had some good feedback so far. Everybody really seems to like it. That's kind of where it's at right now.
So do you have any more books coming out?
Well, I'm thinking about squeezing one more book maybe out of this. It was brought to my attention on another podcast that I was doing. In the first book, I talk a little bit about how I got into the paranormal. And if you've read the book at all, you know that, my wife, she was killed in a fire, and we had a little girl, and I was a single parent now, and I was raising her alone. And one night I could hear her talking in her room, and I just thought she was playing with her toys, My Little Ponies and things of that nature. And I didn't know anything about paranormal stuff.
Right.
And I'm watching, in fact, I talk about it in the book, I'll reveal a little bit of it. I was watching WWF wrestling with Hulk Hogan and all them guys. And I'd put her to bed, and I didn't want to be a hard ass dad, my God, I just lost her mother. And so I'm kind of letting her just chit chat and jibber jabber in this house. It was a mobile home we were living in. It was donated to us by the Red Cross. Lost everything in the fire. And so pretty soon I said, she's got to go to sleep. So I walked down this little narrow hallway, and I peered into her room, and there she's sitting on the edge of her bed, and her little legs are dangling off the side. And I said, honey, it's time to go to sleep. And I left. I just turned around and just kind of walked away. And I took 2 or 3 steps, and I thought, weird. I walked back in her room. I said, who are you talking to? And she was looking at the closet. And this wasn't a very big room. I mean, this room itself was about the size of a large closet.
Right.
Anyway.
Right.
And I remember vividly those little fat, chubby fingers pointing at the closet. And then she turns, she looks at me and says in the most matter-of-fact voice, she says, Mommy. And I was mad. The emotions that I felt from that very moment washed over me like a hurricane of a tidal wave. I got cold and clammy. My throat got just knotted up. The knot in your throat, a hole in my stomach. I mean, the emotions that I felt were just immense. And I looked and stared at that closet. I didn't see anything. As badly as I wanted to see her one more time, there was nothing there. And Melinda then had laid down, and she just went to bed, went to sleep right away. And that's what kind of started me into paranormal. And somebody told me, they said, Alan, have you ever considered the fact that you were in a really dark place? I knew you back then. You were in a really, really dark place. Have you ever considered the fact that something was using your daughter as a vessel to bring you into a dark place? And that dark place would eventually bring you to the Stagecoach Inn? They said that could be a whole story in itself. So maybe.
And you know what? I wonder if this was something to bring you out of that, and you just didn't, since you didn't witness it, it kept you on the path that you were supposed to go on.
I don't know. There's so much research, I think it was a quest for me, maybe. I don't know. it's a book that maybe needs to be written, and it's something I'm gonna have to figure out as I go. But that's possibly a third book to the set of books, because I don't really call Stagecoach Inn book anymore. Even though I did rewrite it, I had 3 books. I really only have 2 on the market now. It's in Conflict and In Too Deep. But if I would, and I've been kind of kicking around titles. I've been trying to use INN in on my descriptions of my books, but I think I'd have to go off the beaten trail on that one and just call it Mommy, because that was kind of what got me going down this road.
Does your daughter see spirits still?
No. In fact, I talked to her later in life. We just general conversation, how do you bring up something like that
You
to your
don't.
child?
I mean,
it's and she doesn't remember it. She does not, under any way, shape, or form, remember that night.
How old was she?
3.
Oh yeah,
wow.
That could just be
Yeah,
it was so normal to her to see Mommy that it wasn't anything unusual.
Yeah. And in all honesty, when I looked into her room, I fully expect her to be playing with one of those, we had all kinds of toys. Oh my God, donated, My Little Ponies and you name it. And I just thought she was probably in there on her bed, just playing.
Right.
And it was simply not the case. And I still, to this day, I relive that sometimes, it comes back. And I often
understand.
And I often have to wonder sometimes if that wasn't some kind, I was really open to a lot of dark stuff. And, I work with a gentleman by the name of Father Ruben Lopez. He is he's a priest. He's an exorcist. He's not an internet exorcist. He works with the Catholic Diocese out of New York. We've had some long, lengthy conversations about the supernatural. He's done a lot of exorcism in his life. He's done it for over 45 years. And he tells me, he says, there's really nothing good out there. He says, what you're talking to is not good spirits. He said, these are demonic things. And, in your heart of hearts, you want to see something, a loved one, Grandma Betty's cookies or whatever. These demonic things are constantly around us, and they will slide into those shoes just to get your attention and to move you away from the light, as he puts it. So, do I believe that? I don't know. I don't know what I believe.
I'll tell you, I have a theory on that as well. I think we all do. But,
and I'm open to everything, and I'm not stuck into any. I don't pigeonhole myself into one thought or one idea.
Right.
I enjoy listening to everybody's ideas and thoughts on the paranormal. We look silly sometimes as investigators when we argue amongst each other about who's right and who's wrong. And we don't look silly to each other. We look silly to those who are standing outside watching us, the ones that don't do this on a daily basis. If we can't figure out on our own what's going on, then how the hell are we going to get these people who don't believe in it anyway to believe in it? And so what we're creating by disagreeing with each other's theories and thoughts is that paranormal mountain that we're trying to climb suddenly becomes steeper and the summit becomes further away. And I try to open my mind up to every thought. There's no wrong answers in what we're doing. There's wrong ways of investigating. You should still be considerate what you're doing, not just because it might be a good spirit, but it might also not be. So, you don't really want to piss anything off either.
That's true.
So, I'm very open to anybody. The young people are the ones that are going to hopefully figure this out. I doubt if I figured it out in my lifetime.
I said something last night. If any of you listened to the show last night, I said something along the lines of a lot of this research that we're doing, we're not going to find out the answers until we're dead.
Right. That's correct.
And we won't care. And the thing is we probably won't be sharing it with you guys because we're dead. So you're going to have to pay attention and figure out what your next step is. And the you're right about that other part too. The drama in the paranormal does make everybody look like children.
Yeah, I
Like
do.
kids.
And in conflict, I talk about that. I cover a lot of bases in the book In Conflict, and I talk about this in general, about how easily it is for a paranormal investigator to wear that proverbial scarlet red letter on your chest. You know, if you don't go with the flow, with that normal beat of the drum with everybody else, and you veer off that path, you can suddenly be chastised from the rest of the group. All of a sudden, those little circles you run in, those circles become away. And now you're alone. And then you're demonized because you have different thoughts, you have different opinions and different ideas. I've seen this happen a lot. And you know, I've been put into that category myself because of the ways that I think. And I think in a lot of respects, you know, that's what destroys what we're doing. And the biggest thing in my mind that destroys what we're doing is as soon as you pay more attention to your Facebook page and seeing how many likes you have, how many videos have been seen, how many people like you, you've lost focus to what your main purpose in being an investigator is.
Yep.
You've lost sight of everything. And I did that when I was at the Stagecoach Inn. I couldn't wait to get that next piece of equipment, you know, that next piece of video out there. All of a sudden, I wasn't so much concerned about how it worked or why it worked or who I was helping anymore. It was more about them. And think about them. Think
It's
about
not
them.
only them though. Sometimes it's our brand. We start thinking about our brand as opposed to
Well,
the next person
in
that
some
needs
respects,
help.
that's okay because we've got to cultivate it a little bit. We've got to make who we are and
Yeah,
what
but
we
it's not
stand for.
everything.
Yeah, it's just a little bit what we stand for, who we are. You know how we approach things, and that's okay. But it's when you just consume yourself with self-indulgence, so to speak, that's when you've lost sight of what you do, and that's where we screw up. And
Yeah,
I don't
there's a
wanna be- I
lot
don't
of
wanna
hey,
be
look
like
at me in this paranormal field,
Yeah, I used to look at my
which
Facebook.
is Facebook.
Yeah, I used to look at that stuff
That's
every
why I'm
day,
not on Facebook. I'm not that kind of person.
5
I
hours
could
a
care
day.
less.
And
The only
now,
reason I use Facebook is to sell my books now.
yeah.
Yeah,
And the thing is I'm on Facebook right now, but I'm not on there.
Right.
I mean, you can see me here on Facebook, but you can see me on YouTube. But you know how much time I spend on Facebook a week? Long enough to put my shows out there and to look and see if there's any new pictures of my grandchildren.
Sure. Yeah.
And to see if anybody has sent me a message that I need to respond to. And, you know, it's not anything against anybody else. I got a job that takes me 80 hours a week to do.
Oh, yeah, I
got
get
stuff
that.
to do.
I get that. You know, I work for Ace Hardware, big deal, right? But you know, it's a full-time job for me. You know, and I write books. I have my book writing, you know, brand, Dark River Books is what I call myself. But you know, I got one question to ask everybody out there. You know, we're talking about a little bit about the demonic, I guess. You know, and things that could be not good spirits, but bad spirits. Let me ask just general question. I'm gonna throw it out there. As far as these things trying to turn you away from the light, think about this. As an investigator on a Saturday or a Friday night, maybe 3 nights in a row, how many times are you talking into the dark to something that's there that you think is there compared to how many times during the week you talk to God? Think about that.
That's a good question.
Think about that.
I know I spend more time talking to God.
Yeah, a lot more.
I do too, but
But
A
that's
lot
not
of people-
everybody.
A lot of
a lot of
don't.
people will come to you and they'll think about that. You know, in an investigation, how many times are you talking to nothing? Make this move. Make that move. These things are happy to do that for you. God doesn't work in those kind of ways. You can't say, hey, God, open the door up for me. He doesn't do that. He doesn't work like that. He never has. He only did it once. And that was back when Jesus was walking the earth with all those little miracles.
Yep.
It's called faith. But these things, whatever they are, will do that. And all of a sudden, that makes it more powerful than God. And that starts turning you away from what I believe is the light. Again, I'm kind of going off on one of my little
No,
tangents. I don't
I
mean
That's
mean,
all
to.
right.
the show is about
But-
you. You
Yeah.
know, if we wanted it to be about us, we wouldn't have had you on, and we'd just sat here and talked. But
Right.
And that's just where my different ideas run. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's right. And I want to emphasize that. Just because I say something doesn't make it right. Because as you said earlier, we won't know any of this until after we're dead.
right. But the thing
You know,
is
but
you
it is a theory.
you are entitled to your opinion
Yeah.
on everything, whatever it is.
And-
You're entitled
and
to
we
tell me the
should-
sky is green. I don't
Well,
know. I mean, I'm not in there.
It could be your opinion.
Yeah. Everybody
So-
has an opinion. Everybody has a right to their opinion, and they shouldn't be chastised for it.
Right.
And that's where I think the separation is. The paranormal is a dog eat dog world, and it is indeed, and I put this in the book, it is a cesspool of self indulgence. And people need to stop for a second and look at the mirror and look at their own reflection and say, am I like them? Who am I? You know, you've really, when you start judging other people about how they do things, you really got to stop and look at yourself. And that's hard for some people to do. Some people are just natural narcissists. I mean, that's just the way they are. But I think in this world, it's a learned process, because once you start making it on Facebook, for instance, you're getting views and you're really trying hard to get your brand going. And then all of a sudden there's somebody new out there and that spotlight's on them. That's where the trouble starts, because now the spotlight's no longer on you. So you start talking smack about them, and this person starts smack about you, and then on and on and on, yada,
Yeah,
yada,
we
yada.
don't
Yep.
do that.
And then you know
We've
how
seen
that
a lot of
story
that.
ends.
Yeah.
Yes.
We've seen a lot, but we don't.
So
we don't do
in that case, what we do is we point and laugh
We're not.
and
We
shake our
don't-
heads a
I
lot.
don't even point and laugh anymore. I don't. I just scroll on by. I don't even
Yeah,
even
I don't
say
see it.
anything.
I mean, honestly, I just don't see it anymore. I don't care.
We just do our own thing.
We do, and you know, and it in a sense, in some respects, that's bad that we all just do our own thing. If we could do it collectively, if we could, say, for instance, I'm going to be going down to Tennessee here at the end of
No, I mean we do our
March.
own thing. We don't get involved in trying to outdo everybody
Oh
else.
no, you don't want to get
Yeah,
involved with, but at the same time, we need to collectively come together and
Oh, right.
share ideas and
Right,
share,
we do.
and I think that's healthy, but it's also healthy to have disagreements.
Oh, it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do.
And
You're going to Tennessee. Are you going to the event in Gatlinburg?
yes, I'm going to the event in where was it called?
Pigeon
Oh,
Forge.
where was it at? I got it wrote down. It's
I know that there's one in Pigeon Forge.
Morristown,
Oh, okay.
Morristown, Tennessee, and that's bizarre in itself.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I had a gentleman call me. And he says, Alan, he says, I'm going to tell you about this haunted location. I said, okay. He says, there's just people and they like to flip houses. They've flipped them now for many years. They have the same construction crew work on these houses constantly. They fix them up for them and then they move on to the next one. They're in this house there in Tennessee in this little town called Morristown. And now the workers refuse to work in there.
Yeah.
Do you know any paranormal investigators that would be happy to investigate? And I said, yeah, me. And they're finding clothes in the walls. They're finding all kinds of weird things. Your voices and footsteps. All the typical stuff. Well, then I come to find out there's a Paracon going down there, all at the same time.
Right.
And so I'm going to go down there. I'll be down there for 7 days. I'm going to investigate this place with a gentleman from. Maybe you've heard of Ghost Gear. Robert Wilcox from Ghost Gear, he's CEO of Ghost Gear. He designs all these really cool and best designs, like the ultrasonic motion sensor and the tower.
That's
Anyway, we're both going down there. He was going to test out some equipment. We're going to be locked in this place for 7 days. Why 7 with me is beyond me. I don't know where that comes from.
Well,
But
to
we're going to
Vegas.
be in there for 7 days, 163 hours, and then I'm going to do this investigation. But there was a lot of battles that happened evidently in Morristown, or at least one
Oh yeah.
between Alvin Gilman, who was in the Union Army, and John C. Vaughn, the Confederate Army. Vaughn had a 1,700 men. Gilman had a strength of 2,800 men. Gilman lost, with the Union Army, killed 8 people. 26 total were either wounded or killed. The Confederate Army in this town, total of 309, 85 killed, and 242 captured and wounded. So that was right there in Morristown. And the railroad that supplied this battle, or these battles, goes right direct. The train tracks are still there.
Mhm.
Goes right directly behind this house. So I have no idea what I'm getting myself into.
You know, you might want to reach out to Nick White.
Never heard of it.
Right.
He lives there in Sevierville.
I don't know where that's at. I don't know anything
okay,
about
so-
Tennessee.
Straight south.
It's just a little bit away from where you're going to be.
Okay. All right.
That's going to be in Morristown, right?
Yeah,
Yes, Morristown.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be-
Santiago's going to be down there.
Yeah, there's
Santiago
couple-
Sierra.
Well, originally a good friend of mine was going to be there, but she backed out the last minute. Dr. Rebecca Foster,
Yeah.
but she was unable to go, I guess. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting investigation. I will have every one of my cameras rolling 24/7. I use these big HD cards. These are big. These are 128 gigabytes, and I will have all my cameras running 24/7. 163 hours of video. We're going to have all of Ghost Gear's equipment running. Everything that I have, millimeters, motion detectors, everything has been now refashioned to set on tripods. So no human contact whatsoever in anything. I'm doing this investigation like a hunt.
Okay.
Like a deer hunt. I kind of understand how people travel and move through houses, just like deer do, from their bedding areas to their feeding areas. So I'm going to be just bombing this place in what I would call the track areas of the investigation with every kind of paranormal device that I can come up with. We're even using 2 SLS cameras. We're using these batteries packs. These are they convert to 110, so we'll have constant power there 24 hours a day. I'm a hater of orbs. I hate orbs. I will be using, you do too. I got this little guy. This is really cool. This is my black light that I use.
Whoa, dust.
I use this.
Okay. There's a difference.
Yeah, but we don't need to talk about
One is orbs and one's dust.
Yeah. So I can kind of tell what's, I walk into a room and I start getting a lot of orbs on my lens. I like to use a black light and shine it around the room. If I start seeing a lot of dust flying around, I go, nah, okay, we've got that figured out. People don't like me just because of that sometimes.
Well, there's.
Well, that's
like
all right.
Ron was
That's how
saying,
you debunk it.
Yeah, right. Dust and water and pollen and all this other stuff.
Oh yeah,
It's
we live in a
when
very dirty
something
planet.
has-
Yeah, that's not orbs. That's dust.
Yes.
See, people they call dust orbs. That's what that bothers me. Orbs are orbs.
I've
Dust
been
is
investigating
dust.
since
Water's water. We've actually seen orbs
with your own eye.
with
But
our
you
own
can't-
eyes. Yes.
Yeah, and those are really hard to you can't prove
It's
it
extremely rare.
because you can't prove it because you're the only one that sees it.
Right.
I have been
Well, she
investigating
saw
since
it.
1982. That's 4 decades, and in those first 2 decades of investigating, did I ever hear the word orb?
No.
It wasn't until probably when these first ghost shows started coming on TV and people were getting, popularizing these ghost hunting shows
Yep.
did the word orb start to come out into view,
Right.
because it grew an audience. So there now you know who I am.
You know,
Denise actually,
I just,
I've seen some, with my own eyes.
I'm going to
before.
say
It's not very many, but Denise actually saw one following me and another guy, Joe. This is in a restaurant, Peppermill in Atchison, and it was about the size of a beach ball. Actually, followed us down the hallway.
wow. The only one I've known like that, it was at the Stagecoach Inn. You were talking about these elementals earlier.
Yeah.
I had a group that came in, and there was 4 people in the group who seen it. They said that there was this sphere that came down out of the sky. They said it was about the size of a muskmelon, I guess, grapefruit, and it came down behind the burial tree, and they said it was bright, it was light. They all seen it. They repositioned themselves to see, get a better look at it, and it was gone.
Yep.
And that was the only time I didn't see it myself. But these were 4 individuals that they all seen the same thing at the same time, and I interviewed them separately from each other, and they all told me the exact same story. So, how do you argue with that?
Right.
Yeah. You
So
can't.
I'm going to say, 95 to 97% of most orbs are dust, bugs,
Right.
moisture,
Yep.
whatever. But there's 3%, that, what is it? When I investigate private residence, I have a series of questions that I ask that are kind of trick questions. And those questions will relate to people in an answer that they can relate to me using words they've heard on ghost shows. It suddenly materialized in front of me, and I'm thinking, okay, material. I use words like materialized. But then you get some of these people that say, I don't know, it was there and then it was just gone. I don't know, or I seen this thing and it was just like, it was a light and it was like floating there and I don't know what it was. And they never refer to it as an orb.
Yeah.
Those people, I believe.
Yeah. So when I saw this thing, I just told Ron, I said, there's a light following you guys down the hall. I did not go, hey, there's an orb. I was like, no, there's this light that's following you guys down the hall. And he had gotten a new phone and I was just using.
I've heard the word orb way back when, way before the ghost hunting shows. So it's not a word that bothers me.
What is it?
He's just saying
an orb. I've heard the word orb. You said that, a lot of these ghost hunting shows were calling them orbs. I've heard it called orbs way before that.
Yeah, and I'd never, and me, where, in my location, of course, you understand when I was first getting into the paranormal, again, in 1982, it was, you didn't talk about hunting ghosts.
Right.
Man. You didn't do it. Oh. You went to some library and you hoped, and I did. We didn't have the internet, didn't have none of that stuff. You go to a library and you'd hope you could find a book on ghosts.
Find something.
Find a newspaper article. I finally found a newspaper article on these crazy people called the Warrens. and they interest me, and of course it was Ed and Lorraine. And there was an article, about it. And that's when I started learning about EVPs and all this crazy stuff. And I started investigating places and I worked construction. I worked a lot of construction and I understood how houses and buildings work. For instance, you were talking about, some of my old investigations from years ago. I debunked this stuff. I tried to. This family gets a hold of me and they say, "Hey, we understand you like looking for ghosts." I go, "Yeah, I do. I kind of keep it on the down low, but yeah, I do." "Well, can you come to our house? We're hearing voices in the basement." And I said, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure, I'll come over." And it was a new house. They didn't understand. It was a brand new house to them, an older house. And we're sitting there, and it was like watching paint dry. And they said, "You hear that?" I go, "No, I didn't." I didn't hear anything. They go, wait a minute. And then I heard it. And it sounded like a voice. And it was coming from the basement. And so right away, I took my daughter's Fisher Price tape recorder and I went down to the basement. I was going to do some EVPs.
So how serious
And-
do these people take you at this point?
I didn't know.
And so
I know you're a professional, right?
I'm down there and I don't hear anything. Yeah, that's all I had.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything fancy. So so I didn't hear anything. I go back upstairs, about 20 minutes go by, and we heard it again. I said, son of a gun. I said, there's something that's a voice. I hear a voice. So I go down there in the basement. I turn my little Fisher Price tape recorder on, and I'm standing there saying, if there's a ghost here, talk to me, do something. And then I heard it. Clear as a bell. And I knew what it was right away. And I walked upstairs and I said, you got a glass of water? And they thought I just wanted to drink. They said, here you go. And I walked back down the basement and they said, come on with me. I said, you see that floor drain right there? I said, listen. We stood there and listened. And sure enough, it sounded like voices coming from out of that floor drain.
Oh, really?
What was going on was somebody would flush a toilet or it would fall into the main line out in the street. And that sound, that splashing sound would emanate up the laterals and it went into that dry pea trap and it sounded like a voice coming. I said, pour some water down there and that voice will stop. So that's what I was doing for years. I mean, rafters you hear people walking along rafters. I say, well, when did this all start? Well, it started after we did, we heard that, if you do construction on your house, you start turning up spirits and ghosts. And I said, well, what'd you do? He said, I just put a new roof on. And so I go out and I'm looking around. I could hear this stuff going on in this house, these bangs and clunks and all kinds of stuff. And finally, it dawned on me that this guy didn't have a single roof vent in his house, not one. And what was going on was the house during the day was swelling like a big balloon.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And then at night, when you get those cool breezes and stuff going across the house, it would contract. And of course, for every action is an opposite equal reaction, and it would make the floor joists twist and bow. And it sounded just like somebody was walking across the ceiling.
Right.
So that's what I've done for years. And that's why I thought, you know what? I've got all this paranormal stuff figured out. And then here comes the stagecoach in.
Yeah, we all find out that there's something in the pie that we didn't know about at some point. So
yeah, we went to a house that we were called to. It was a trailer, and they said they're getting some activity in their living room and their kitchen. Well, they had some exposed wiring. One, I don't know if they're doing a remodel or something. They said, but the worst thing is the scratching in our bedroom. We go back there. Of course, I was back there a while and didn't hear any scratching. So I walk around the house. They said, what are you doing? I went back there. Well, they got this big tree back here with about 2 or 3 squirrel nests, about 2 or 3 branches that went right over to the roof,
to the eaves
and under. And I watched this squirrel go all the way down and go up inside the roof. And I went, okay, does it sound like little bitty claws? Oh, I don't know. It could be demonic. And I went, it's a squirrel. They didn't believe me. I said, I just watched it go in.
Well, we told them they could be mice.
And there's and 95.
It went right where the bedroom was.
and if people would actually take the time to go along with a paranormal investigator, they would find out that, and at least in my little world, paranormal investigating is pretty freaking boring.
Yeah.
You can go to these paid locations and you can usually find activity.
Right.
I've been to Malvern, found activity, Villisca during the day. Didn't really find anything because I didn't have any equipment with me, but there were some people that claimed they were experiencing things. I've been to Edinburgh Manor. Wow. You ever been there, Edinburgh?
No, we want to go.
A lot of stuff moves around in that place. A lot of stuff moves around. I have never figured it out. I've been there 3 times. and you hear things moving. You hear what sounds like chairs sliding across the floor, like somebody grabbed like a metal chair and drag it across the concrete floor.
Yeah,
It's those kind of sounds you hear. I've heard what sounds like balls bouncing in there. Very active place. So there's places that you can pay to go to, but a majority of what I do as a paranormal investigator, which is mostly I try to help people. That's what I lost focus of when I got into this the Stagecoach Inn. I lost track of what I was actually supposed to do and help people.
Yeah, you're wrapped up in it.
90, I did, and I lost track of who I was. And 85% of what I do turns out to have an explanation to it. It truly does. I can find some, and that, believe it or not, I'm a weird duck. I don't want to find a ghost. I really don't want to find a ghost in somebody's house, simply because I know how difficult it is to get rid of them.
Yeah.
I would much rather find an explanation to what's going on. I don't wear a black t-shirt. I don't do all that stuff. I believe that they believe there's something going on. My job is to figure out what that something is. And that's what I really try to do. And normally I can, but there's times that I can't. Is it still paranormal? I don't really call it paranormal. I just say I just can't figure it out. I don't call it a ghost. I know here in the state of Iowa, you got to be real careful about calling someplace haunted, because you got to disclose that in your sale of your house. And that's kind of dangerous for a paranormal investigator in Iowa, because if somebody would say they're selling their house for, let's say, make it an easy number, $40,000, and they're selling it for $40,000 because they think there's a ghost there, because somebody in brand X said there's a ghost there.
Yeah.
So they got to sell it at 40,000 instead of at 60,000. So they finally sell their house at $40,000, and they get a phone call one afternoon, and they say, "Hey, you remember that sound you said you always heard? Well, it was a roof vent. It was doing this or that or the other thing." So now you got a pissed off person that calls up brand X and says, "You know what? You screwed me. You told me there was a ghost here, and this is what it was. And I'm going to sue your butt off."
That's something that, if you only have one team come in and investigate, and this one team says it's haunted, that's not proof.
Mm-hmm. Well,
that's wishful thinking.
In the state of Iowa, it is.
Well, that's stupid.
Yeah, it is.
And
you supposed to get snow tonight?
Northern Iowa, they're saying above somewhere around Ames, maybe we could get some snow. We might get some freezing rain. Maybe.
Where are you at?
Iowa.
No, whereabouts?
I'm in Ankeny, Iowa.
Oh, okay.
I'm about 30 minutes south of Ames.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. See, Ron's family's from Red Oak.
Oh, clear down in southwest Iowa. I know exactly where Red Oak's at.
Yeah, Red Oak. Got some in Creston.
I have family that Grand River, Iowa is where my family hails from. Creston, Thayer, all the Lynn County, Lineville, South Lineville, North Lineville.
Yep. Well, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. And
Carl's got another show here in
Nope, we don't have another show.
Oh, you don't have one?
So
no, it was moved to Friday nights.
Oh, Fridays. Okay.
So I'd like to thank you so much for coming on.
No one tells me anything, so
not a problem. I really enjoyed myself. I really enjoyed myself. I would ask anybody that's interested in, I just briefly touched on my books. I mean, there's so much more to the story of the Stagecoach Inn. You can read about it in my book, In Too Deep, which I was in way too deep. I was in way over my head. And it tells the whole story from beginning to almost the end. And then my second book, In Conflict, which describes my mental state, I guess, my condition of battling with my own demons in order to go back and investigate it one more time. And you can find my book at darkriverpublishings.com, or darkriverbooks.com. There's a couple different websites. Or you can visit me and send me a message on my Dark River Paranormal page. Send me a message, and I can send you a signed version of the book. It costs a little more to send it because I'm not Amazon. I can't afford the shipping.
You'll have your
So
own
it
truck.
costs a little more, but I will personalize each book, and I use the Square. So I'll talk to you on the phone. You can ask me questions about the end. We have nice little conversations. I've had several with quite a few people, and they like to talk to the author. It's kind of cool for them. And then I ask them, how do you want me to write in it, and they said just say something. So that's how that kind of
write
works.
something.
Yeah, I just kind of best wishes, stay spooky, something, or they might have something they really want me to say to them, and so I will, I'll write down whatever they want, and then I'll just give them a signature. I've also got those prints I showed you. These prints are available if you buy both books together. And the only way you can get in there, they're $25 a piece. They're $25 a piece. But the only way you can get a print is if you get both books together. If you've already got the Ghost Legend Stagecoach in, and then you buy In Conflict, you can still get the print. But either way, you've got to get both books.
Well, where can everybody find? You just told everybody where you can find your books and where they can see you.
You can find my book at darkriverpublications.com or on Amazon. Just type in Alan Cornelson, or you can type in Conflict or In Too Deep on Amazon, and it'll take you right directly to the directly to the page.
Yeah, we shared some links during the
Yeah,
show.
the link
so
for
they should
Amazon
be able
is
to
in the
see that.
comments.
Yeah.
And they can see you in Morristown, Tennessee.
We're going to be there eventually in April. We're going to try to do a couple little live streams from there, probably with a phone. There's no internet there. I have really no way to do a nice, fancy broadcast. What I'm considering on doing is we're going to film the whole thing. It's 163 hours total.
Yeah.
So if it is active, we're going to try to break it up into pieces, hour segments, and post it on YouTube. And so there'd be probably 163 episodes.
Yeah.
If we catch anything, we'll kind of leave it, at the end of each episode, kind of leave you hanging if we're actually catching some activity or not. It's going to be really cool the way we're going to set it up. So it'd be a lot of fun to watch.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And if you ever want to come back and talk about anything, let us know.
Yeah.
We can get you on.
I appreciate, the time. Not a lot of people ask me to come on anything. So I greatly appreciate you bringing me on your show. It's been a wonderful
you're
time.
more than welcome anytime, Alan.
Well, thank you.
Yep,
very
just
much.
speak up. Just reach out if you've got something you want to share, or you guys do this investigation and you want to talk about it.
Yeah, I want to hear about this place. I've never heard of it.
Well, maybe if you give me your phone number, maybe at the end of this show, we'll talk a little bit, and I'll get your phone number. And if I have any activity, I'll give you a call.
Well, you have my number.
No, I do. Yes.
Yeah.
So we took care of that. So everyone, please join us here next Monday night when I have my guest, Lena Townsend, a local psychic medium here out of Kansas City, 7 p.m. Central on the Paranormal Pride. And I'll surprise you here next Tuesday night at 5 p.m. Central with whoever I find that you guys are going to find interesting.
Right.
I always find somebody. So join us then. And Carl?
Yeah, check out the Billerites Network where we're live at. Check out Things Network where we're live at. And also the Temple of Phoenix Rising Entertainment page. And also Japan Paranormal where we're live. And we're also live on YouTube and everywhere. But on the Billerites Network, you can check out all our shows we have over there. Let's see. The next show will be Friday night. Will be The Conservative View at 8 p.m. So check that out. That's about all I got to say tonight. Thank everybody in the chat room for joining us. And have a good evening. We'll talk to you all later.
Good night.